Some AliExpress watches are great, and some aren't. This could be the end of my channel, at least with AliExpress watches. Let's get into why. Welcome back to the channel. Please subscribe if you're into watches and give the video a like if you like it. Now, you've probably heard of Seagull watches. In fact, I reviewed a Bauhaus model that they sent me a month or so ago. What I didn't tell you on that video was that the other watch they sent me was this. This is a Gigididi Gigididi Gigididi, let's have sex. So Seagull initially asked me if I could review this, and I asked them if I could actually just review the Bauhaus model because it was more my thing. And they emailed me to say, could I just review both? So here we are. What sort of specs does a watch called Gigididi have? If it wasn't clear from that intro, the brand did send this to me for free, and it's all pretty standard fare in terms of specs, at least on paper. A 41.5mm diameter, normal for a dive watch. A thickness of 13mm, again, fine. A lug-to-lug of 47mm, and 20mm lugs tapering down to 15.5mm, and then 18.5mm at the clasp. But as we know, specs aren't everything, and although this seems pretty good on paper, it's how it looks that's the problem. Well, it's one of quite a few problems. So I normally do a pros section and a cons section, but today we're basically just doing a cons section. In fact, let's do the pros section now. Pros, it's got a pretty good sapphire crystal and decent AR coating, and the dial finish is okay. Right, done. So, cons. The cons are kind of the whole thing. So, despite what your mum always told you, looks really do count. This has Mercedes hands, Tudor-like square applied indices, and then a GMT bezel insert. What the fuck? So some wise guy decided to put a three-hander with date movement inside this, and then a GMT bezel insert on the outside. The movement in question is the Seagull ST1612. It hacks, hand winds, and it's got a power reserve of about 36 hours. After which you'll have lost all patience anyway. Because although this looks like a diver, it's only got 100 meters of water resistance and just a push-pull crown. The other tactile elements of this watch aren't great either. It's got a 60-click unidirectional bezel and doesn't align. I mean, it's not even close. It's also not very easy to use because the polishing gives it this slippery smoothness that makes it very difficult to grip. The clasp is also a nightmare for the opposite reason. As in, it's way too sharp. It's a Rolex style fold over, but it's rattly and could honestly cut your skin if you mishandled it. Also, Gigididi is yet another brand that I have to include on a long email I have telling brands to stop doing dive extensions. At least on watches that currently cost about 72 quid, which is about $91, which, okay, it's relatively cheap, but there are so many good options around that price point on AliExpress and websites like that. We're talking Pagani Design, Addy's Dive, Steel Dive, and about a million others, all of whom have refined their feature-heavy, wallet-tight watches and probably don't make the decision to polish the entire head of a watch that costs £72. It looks cheap and it feels nasty. Annoyingly, there's a display case back, which I always do like on most watches, and I'll generally praise them when I see them. But the overall package of this means this doesn't really feel that it's deserving of that praise. In fact, I've left the QC Passed sticker on the case back because it's like a motivational tool, right? Like, if this thing can pass quality control with that hideously misaligned bezel and the clasp that could genuinely be used in the kitchen from the bare, then, you know, you're doing great, you're okay, you're doing good. There's also the finishing. I think the lack of any variation on the case would be fine if it was polished well, but it isn't. And here's a weird one. I think that the head of the watch and the bracelet look like they're different grades of steel. And on this plastic wrapping that I took off the bracelet, it does say 904L steel. That's the same grade of steel that they use for the Rolex Submariner. And I think that the head of the watch is probably 316L steel and the bracelet 904L steel, hence that kind of weird discrepancy. It gives it a really jarring look in person. And look, I could go on moaning, but suffice to say, I think there's a lot that needs to change here. This watch doesn't know if it's a Submariner homage, a GMT Master 2 homage, or a Tudor homage. What you end up with is all of those things and none of them at the same time. It's a lesson in how not to do a homage watch. On paper, the specs seem okay, but the execution is all over the place. I'm sure this isn't the feedback the brand would have liked, and I think they, as well as lots of other AliExpress brands, will probably blacklist me and won't want to send me any more watches, but sometimes I think things call for a bit of directness. An automatic full stainless steel watch for 73 quid was always going to be this bad, you might say, but there are plenty I've reviewed and will review that do it better for less. So yeah, this is not good, and I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10, and that's mainly because the sapphire crystal is pretty alright. So that's the Gigididi. Saying that out loud is embarrassing. I'll keep you informed as to whether Seagull do email me back or not, so subscribe if you want to stay in the loop. I do hope that there's some useful feedback in there, and I hope that Seagull take it on board. Also, I'd like to thank them again for sending this to me for free. If you want to see something good from the brand, then check out the Bauhaus homage I reviewed earlier here. And if you want to see a really good AliExpress homage, then click here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.